everyone. So last week we talked about solving quadratics by factoring. And solving quadratics by factoring is awesome because you guys are great at factoring. You can set equal to 0 and solve. But not all quadratics are factorable. And so there's one other method for quadratics that we're going to learn this year. And that's solving quadratics by using this thing called the quadratic formula. So there's lots of quadratics out there that we can't factor. Like you can't get the a value to be 1. Otherwise it creates like fractions and stuff, and no one wants to try to factor using fractions. And so if it's not a nice factorable quadratic, we use this thing called the quadratic formula. And we're going to kind of work up to the quadratic formula. The first piece, and I talked about it last week in Zoom a little bit, and I think in the video, I don't remember. There are 3 different types of solution sets for a quadratic. So quadratics can live like below the x-axis, and therefore it crosses the x-axis twice, once here, once here. And again, remember, these are the solutions where it crosses the x-axis. Those are called x-intercepts. They're also called zeros and roots. I typically stick with zeros and x-intercepts, but I mean, they're all the same thing. And that's just where it crosses the x-axis. So that's when, we take our quadratic, get it set equal to 0. And last week we were able to factor and find these 2 points. So sometimes a quadratic passes through in 2 points. Sometimes it only just barely hits the x-axis, and it technically only touches at 1 point. So sometimes just the vertex lives on the x-axis. And other times the quadratic lives up here above the x-axis, and it actually never crosses the x-axis. So this is the case when there are 2 solutions. This is the case when there is 1 solution. And this is the case when there are no solutions. So depending on the number of solutions, it's going to look different from using quadratic formula a little bit. And I'm actually going to teach you guys kind of a shortcut to be able to help you guys determine when there's 2 solutions, 1 solution, or no solutions without having to use the graph. All right, so this trick is called the discriminant. So the discriminant has this formula b squared minus 4ac. And as you guys know, these letters are going to come from the base of a quadratic is ax squared plus bx plus c. So once again, we're going to label our a, b, and c values and figure out the a, b, and c so we can plug into lots of formulas. For this case, the discriminant formula is this. And so the case is if your discriminant value, so you're going to get some number. This is going to equal some number. And actually all we care about is usually what the sign is or if it's equal to 0. So when we plug in and we get a positive number, that means there's 2 solutions. If we plug in and we get 0, then that means there's 1 solution. And if you plug in and you get a negative number, that means there's no solutions. And so then, here's these cases illustrated. So there's 2 solutions when the discriminant is positive, or when, b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0. 1 solution happens when the discriminant is equal to 0. And so that means b squared minus 4ac just literally equals 0. And then the last case is when the discriminant is negative. b squared minus 4ac is less than 0. So these are the 3 cases. And the discriminant is helpful because there's one case where we wouldn't have to keep working. If you do the discriminant and find that it's negative, that means there's no solutions. So you can literally stop solving right there and be like, oh, this quadratic has no solutions. It does not cross the x-axis. There are no answers. And so the discriminant is a nice helpful shortcut, really. And then obviously if you get positive or 0, you're going to have to keep solving. But if it's negative, you can just stop and be like, no solution. Sweet, I'm done. And so let's just practice some discriminant problems and see what we get. So here's some quadratics. They're set equal to 0, so we're attempting to solve for their solutions. So the first step is, label A, B, and C. Your A value is 6, B is -2, and C is 2. So plugging into b squared minus 4ac. Remember, whenever you're plugging in, I always set up parentheses. So your b value, remember, be careful with negatives. Your b value is -2, so it's -2 squared. Now, don't forget, if you type this in your calculator without the parentheses, you're going to get the wrong answer. -2 squared is -2 times -2, which makes +4. But if you put it in your calculator without the parentheses, it's going to tell you it's -4 because it's doing the 2 squared and then multiplying by the negative. So make sure you're putting parentheses. -4, and then A is 6, C is 2. So you can simplify this by hand, or you can use Desmos. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this by hand real quick. -2 squared is 4, minus 4 times 6 is 24. 24 times 2, 24 plus 24 is 48. So 4 minus 48 would be -44. And so in this case, we get a negative discriminant. So that means that how many solutions are there? There are no solutions. No solutions. Because there's a negative. Now, I have my laptop pulled up here. I'm going to try to show you guys. You can also just go to Desmos and type this stuff in. So, this case, it is -2 shift 6 squared, -2 squared, minus 4 times 6 times 2. And as you see, you get -44. Woo! So like I said, you do not have to do this stuff by hand. I'm honestly hoping that you guys are using Desmos, and as we go on here, I'm going to tell you guys to find your answers using Desmos. So, yeah, so if you're struggling with simplifying, please just go to Desmos Scientific. Literally just Google Desmos Scientific, and you've got it. All right, so let's keep going. This is my really, technical way of making notes and showing you guys stuff on my computer, by the way. All right, so another example. A is 10, B is -6, C is -21. So remember, make sure you're labeling first. And then we're going to plug into the discriminant, see how many solutions there are. And so for the last example, there was no solutions. And so if there's no solutions, you wouldn't have to keep solving. So let's see here. If we get a positive or 0, that means we'd have to keep solving to actually find what these points are. But if you get no solution, you can just be like, nah, we're done, no solution. All right, so we've got b squared. So remember, put parentheses, -6 squared. Minus 4 times 10 times -21. See, this one's not a good time. So let's just go over to Desmos and just tie up this whole thing in. I gotta tilt my phone. Me. All right, so I'm just gonna replace these. We've got -6 squared minus 4 times 10 times -21. And we get 876. Rad. Okay. So I'm gonna put it back down here. I feel like I'm going to break my phone. All right. So we get 876. Okay, well, that's a giant number. Does it matter how big it is? No. But we got a positive. And if we get a positive, that means there's 2 solutions. So if it's a positive, discriminant's positive, 2 solutions. So I know that I'm going to have 2 solutions. So it's a nice way to check yourself that once we start doing quadratic formula on the next page, that way if you do the discriminant first, you'll know, oh, I'm supposed to get 2 answers that are different. All right, last example, A value. Remember, this one's kind of tricky because I changed up the lettering on you, but it's b squared plus 8b plus 16. So the number out front of your first term is 1 if there's nothing there. Your b value is 8, and your c value is 16. And then we just plug in. So your b value is 8, so 8 squared minus 4 times, plug in A, is 1, and then C is 16. Woo. All right, so like I said, just go to Desmos. So let's just go plug it in. We've got, let's see. All right, we've got 8 squared this time. And then the helpful thing about Desmos too is you can just leave this up and do what I'm doing and just delete stuff and plug it back in. So it's 8 squared minus 4 times 1 times, delete, 16. Oh, look at that. We got 0. Haha. All right, so if we go back. So we got 0 for this one. So this one we got 0. And so remember when it equals 0, 0 means one solution. Sweet. All right, so this is using the discriminant, and all that's telling you is if we graphed it, how many times would it cross the x-axis? Would it cross twice? Does it hit just once in one spot, or does it not cross at all and have no solutions? And so the reason why that's helpful is because up next we have this thing called the quadratic formula. So x equals negative b plus or minus. So technically this plus or minus here means there's two solutions when you add or subtract. So I'm going to show you guys that we're going to turn that into something plus and something minus. The square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. First of all, there's two pieces here that hopefully look familiar. There's a negative b over 2a out front, and that, remember, is the x value of your vertex, x value of vertex formula. And then the b squared minus 4ac under the square root, that's your discriminant formula. Discriminant formula. So the quadratic formula is actually just made up of like the vertex formula and the discriminant formula put together, and that gives you the zeros of your quadratic, and it's actually really cool. So this looks really big and scary, but we're just going to use Desmos to simplify it. And so like I said, the a, b, and c values just come from labeling your quadratic. So step 1, solve for the discriminant and find the number of solutions. So this is just a little trick, and it's helpful to know how many solutions you should get. So we're going to do this example over here. And so remember, what we're solving for is the zeros, and just so we're solving for where does it cross the x-axis, or does it cross the x-axis at all. And as you can see, this quadratic is not something that we can factor. So, you know, the a value is not 1, so that's the first problem. And normally we try to pull out the 3 and see what's left over. So, you know, 3x squared divided by 3 is x squared. But then negative 7 divided by 3 is a fraction or a decimal. It would be negative 7/3 x. And then negative 26 divided by 3 isn't nice either, so then it'd be negative 26/3. Does that look like it's going to factor? No, and we don't probably want to try to figure that out. And so because it doesn't factor, we have to use this formula. So factoring is like the easy way to solve, and it's preferable, but not every quadratic is nice and can factor. So so that's when you go to this backup method of the quadratic formula, which it looks a little scary, but it's the same thing. You're going to solve for the same thing, it's just a little bit more work. So the first step is let's find how many zeros it's going to give us. So a is 3, b is negative 7, and c is negative 26. So let's plug into the discriminant. So remember, discriminant formula is b squared minus 4ac. So we've got negative 7 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 26. And as you guys know, I don't, go to Desmos, right? Let's find this number. So we've got negative 7 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 26. And we get 361. All right. So this part under the square root here is 361. So b squared minus 4ac for this example is 361, which is positive. So that means there's two solutions. Rad. So then next up, if we get solutions, like if there are real solutions, then we're going to keep going. So if solutions exist, put the discriminant under the square root. So we just found this part. So b squared minus 4ac is the number we just found. So what's really great is we can just go ahead and put 361 in there. So that's why it's kind of a shortcut and why I have you guys do that step first. Because it's helpful, A, and if it's no solution, you can just stop and be like, yo, it's no solution. But if it's not, then that 361 is helpful because we just did the hardest part of the quadratic formula. So we know that it's going to be negative b plus or minus the square root of, we just found, 361 over 2a. So what I'm doing, you guys, is I'm filling this in step by step. And so I'm just like, okay, we found this piece, so let's fill that in. Step 3, now let's plug a and b in. We already know, right? Here's a and b. So let's replace this and this with the numbers that we know. So really, and then the negative is part of the formula. So you're always going to have the negative out front. And then b here is negative 7. So it's negative. Remember, always use parentheses. Negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 361 all over 2 is part of the formula, and then parentheses a is 3. And then so your last step is, this is really messy, right? This is a lot of stuff. Well, don't worry about it. Just go on over to Desmos and plug this in. Now you do have to plug it in as two different things. So this plus or minus, what this plus or minus means is there's really two solutions here, which there should be, right? This can split up into, this is, so I'm going to make negative 7 is positive 7. So 7, I'm going to do plus first. 7 plus root 361 over 2 times 3 is 6. Or what happens if you subtract it? So 7 minus root 361 over 6. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to Desmos, plug these two things in, and find the decimal. So, all right, let's go over to Desmos. So I've got 7 plus SQRT. There's a square root button on here too. You can just click square root. I'm just used to typing in square root. 7 plus square root of 361. All divided by, oh, I have to put parentheses, so that divides over the whole thing. Make sure that it's dividing over the whole thing, so it's all over 2a, so 7 plus or minus root 361, all over 2 times 3, which is 6. All right, so our first answer, we get this nice decimal, 4.3 repeating. Most of your homework has you go 3 decimal places, and you don't need to be perfect about rounding. It lets you have, some rounding error a little bit. So I would just call this 4.333. So our first answer is 4.333. And then what's awesome about this, you guys, is you don't have to change anything except for the negative. So just go back over here, delete the positive, make it a negative. Oh, and there's your second answer, negative 2. And you don't even have to round this one, negative 2. So your solutions are x equals 4.333 comma negative 2. Now on your homework, there's a lot of questions because the WAMAP isn't like super user-friendly sometimes. A lot of times it asks you to list the smaller number first. So it'll say like x1 equals and x2 equals, which represent your two solutions. So in WAMAP, it tells you to list the smaller one first. So I want you guys to ask yourself, what's smaller, 4.33 or negative 2? And hopefully we can realize that the smaller number is going to be the negative 1. So it's negative 2 should be your first answer, and then 4.333. Not all of them ask for that, but as I went through and I made your homework, some of them ask for that. So just make sure, like, if you're getting them wrong for some reason and you check my answer key, just make sure you're putting in like the smaller one in the first one and the bigger one in the second one. And then some of them are also just like this, where you can just list them out and it doesn't matter what order they're in. But some of them are like specifically like list the smaller solution first and then the bigger one. And that's just so it can grade you accurately. Yeah. All right, so let's reflect real quick. So quadratic formula. First step is you just plug into b squared minus 4ac and you get the number that lives under the square root. If it's positive, there's 2 solutions. If it's 0, 1 solution. If it's negative, there's no solutions, and you don't even have to do the rest of this. So in step 2, if you have solutions, you start filling in the quadratic formula. I just like to fill in the square root first. If you guys want to skip ahead and just plug in the a and the b, and then start plugging into Desmos, go for it. I just want to take it really nice and slow with you guys. So let's do some examples. So first up, let's label a, b, and c. Your a value is 9, your b value is 3, your c value is negative 24. And so let's do step 1. Let's find the discriminant. B squared minus 4ac. Let's get that going. So that would be 3 squared minus 4 times 9 times negative 24. So let's go ahead and go to Desmos. I'm going to hit enter and save one of my discriminant ones. So we've got 3 squared minus 4 times 9 times negative 24. All right, so this one is 873. Wow, that's a big one. So it's positive, so that means you're going to get 2 solutions. So let's come down here, 873. So we got that this was 873. So there's 2 solutions because it's positive. All right, if we keep going, so now into step 2, if solutions exist, remember, if solutions exist, now put that into the square root. So step 2, we've got x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of 873 all over 2a. Step 3 is start, fill in b and a, from these values. So x equals negative, and your b value is 3. And I always just use parentheses, positive or negative. 873 all over 2 times 9. Great. And so then remember step 4, simplify on Desmos. You're going to need to make 2 things out of this. This technically turns into negative 3 plus root 873 over 2 times 9 is 18. And if you want, you can just type all of this into Desmos. I'm just doing the simple stuff real quick. And then this one is negative 3 minus root 873 over 18. And you have to type them in separately on Desmos because it doesn't do the plus or minus. The reason why we use the plus or minus is because it's just a quick way to write both solutions without having to write both of these things out because they're really similar. So let's go ahead and I'm going to go to Desmos and type this in. So I'm just going to use this one up here. So, and just delete some stuff. So the first term is negative 3 and it's plus square root 873. Square root 873 over 18. So my first answer is this one. It's 1.47480. So Desmos has you guys round to 3 decimal places. I don't really want to give you guys a lesson on rounding right now. So I would say just use the first 3 decimals. So 1.474 will get you the right answer. Now, if you're good at rounding, there's an 8 over here, so that means the 4 should go up to a 5. So 1.475 is technically the right answer. Like I said, 3 decimal places. I have it set up so the rounding doesn't need to be absolutely perfect. So 1.474 will get you there. So your first one is 1.474. And then to find the next one, let's just change the plus to a minus. See what we get. Negative 1.808. And we'll write that. So, kind of ran out of room, but x equals your 2 solutions are, I'm going to write them in order, negative 1.808, comma, 1.474. And so this is why we use quadratic formula, though, you guys, because these are really not nice answers, right? But that's where it crosses the x-axis. That's the 2 places where your quadratic crosses. And that's why we have quadratic formula because, it's decimals and they're not super friendly. All right, the second example. I think this needs to be, this needs to switch. I made a mistake when I made this the first time. So it should be 2m squared minus 12m plus 18. It'll be right on your guys's. I just printed it. And as you guys can tell, my printer only prints in blue ink and doesn't work too well. So reprinting things around here is a hassle. All right. So your A value is 2, B value is negative 12, and C value is 18. So let's try finding the discriminant. I'm not going to write it all out. B squared minus 4ac every time. So negative 12 squared minus 4 times 2 times 18. All right, Desmos. And I left my discriminant one here. And I'm just gonna, so this is my final step one. This is my discriminant one. If you just leave them in here, it'll tell you the answers over here. So we've got negative 12 squared minus 4 times 2 times 18. All right, oh, sweet, I got 0. All right, so if we come back over here, our discriminant gives us 0. So that tells us there's 1 solution. Now it's still true, if solutions exist, put the discriminant under the square root. So, we do have 1 solution. If it's 0, that means there is 1 solution. So we got to keep going. So step 2, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of 0 is what we just found over 2a. And then step 3 is, start filling in the rest of it. So x equals negative, b is negative 12. So negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 2 times a, which is 2. Now real quick, we can simplify this pretty quickly here. Now if you want, you could go to Desmos right now and type all this in. But remember, it's 2 pieces, right? So step 4, we go to Desmos. Negative 12 makes positive 12. The square root of 0 is 0. So it's 12 plus 0 over 2 times 2 is 4. And 12 minus 0 over 4. So like I said, if you want, you can go to Desmos and type these in. You're going to get the same answer for both. So 12 plus 0 and 12 minus 0 are the same thing. So this one equals 12 divided by 4 is 3. And this one, 12 divided by 4 is 3. So they're both the same answer, which is why it's only one solution. So x equals 3. Ta-da! So there's only one thing you'll need to type in or write on your quiz. Yeah, and that really just comes from your square root piece just disappears, right? Like it really ends up just becoming negative b over 2a because the 0 disappears. Like 12 plus 0 is 12. 12 minus 0 is 12. So, yeah. All right, and then the last case, a value is 11, b value is negative 7, c value is 3. So let's check the discriminant. So negative 7 squared minus 4 times 11 times 3. So b squared minus 4ac. Great. Desmos time. So I'm going to change my discriminant one. And we've got negative 7 this time. Negative 7 squared minus 4 times 11 times 3. Oh, I got a negative. We got negative 83. So my answer for this one is negative 83. And remember, if you get a negative, there's no solution. So if your discriminant is negative, there's no solutions. So what's great about this problem, you guys, is you can just stop. There's no solutions. And you're done. And so for questions like this, there's an option on your homework where it'll be like, no solution, and you're done. Ta-da! All right, guys. So hopefully this goes okay. I know that there's a lot of steps. So hopefully the notes are helpful. And really, Desmos is really the key here. So if you guys have any questions, you just let me know. I'll see you guys in class and in the homework quiz question time. Hopefully this goes well. Bye, guys.